Hi everybody, this is Orsina Amsler from www.amslerartroom.com, here with a remote learning lesson on how you can create an interesting drawing with the theme of negative space. Now when we talk about negative space in art, we're talking about the areas around objects in a picture. So very simply, negative space are the areas in the holes of this laundry basket, whereas the positive space would be the parts that are the basket themselves. Now, negative space is a very important thing in art in how artists compose or arrange their pictures. For example, in Van Gogh's famous painting of sunflowers, the areas between the flowers and the edge of the canvas are thoughtfully designed. So there was very considerate and deliberate thought as to which flowers touched the edge of the composition and where these areas of negative space are. Similarly, in this still life, also by Van Gogh, of flowers, there is specific thought as to how the background interacts with the objects themselves and how some parts of the objects touch the edge to create interesting areas of negative space. So today we're going to use an object that hopefully you all have at home, a bicycle, and the sunshine to create an interesting drawing about negative space. You are going to need a brown paper grocery bag, which I have flattened by, I'll just show you the bag here. I cut down one of the sides and then I removed this bottom piece, opened it up, and now I have this nice piece of brown paper. This is probably bigger than you need, but start with this. If you do not have a brown paper grocery bag at home, you could use the inside of a cardboard box, any piece of cardboard that you may have, that would also work. So I have my bicycle set up here with a strong shadows. This will only work on a super sunny day. And you're going to lay your paper down and you're going to look at the interesting ways that the shadows fall across the paper. You can move the paper in a variety of positions to find something that is interesting to you. And then when you are happy with that, use a couple of rocks to hold down your paper so it won't move as we go to trace our shadows. Now, before I start tracing this, I do want to give you an alternative. If you don't have a bicycle at home, another option you can do is see if you can find a fallen branch that has some interesting small little pieces like you have here. Prop this up against something like the side of your house, and you can see the beautiful shadows that are being cast on the ground. And that is an alternative option if you don't have a bicycle, or if you would just prefer to do something that's a bit more natural. Okay. As I start my tracing here, what I'm going to be tracing are the shapes of the shadows. Some of them are a little blurry, so do your best. Some of them are a little bit more easy to see. You don't want to crisscross any of your lines. You're basically, sometimes you got to position yourself so that you don't cast a shadow on your drawing. You can use a Sharpie or a pencil to do this. Just take your time and try to, as best you can, outline the shapes of those shadows. So when you're done, and I can see that the sun has even shifted the position of this in the time it took me to trace this, what you're going to have is something that doesn't necessarily look like a bicycle, but looks almost like the shadow of a bicycle. All of your shapes should be separate, closed off shapes that do not touch each other. So there really are no intersecting lines at all. I made a little mistake somewhere, no big deal, I think right here, because it's tricky. You have a lot of small little shapes. But this is sort of the idea where we have the shadow of the bicycle traced. The shadow represents what was the positive space. and all of the spaces between the spokes represent the negative space. Once you finish your tracing, it's time to finish up your drawing with your choice of embellishment. As you can see here, I have cropped my drawing down from the large size of paper that it was down to just the wheel area. And I have chosen to use colored pencil in my areas of negative space. The positive space, which is the frame of the bike, the spokes of the bike, and the wheel of the bike, those parts remain the brown paper of the bag. They have no color on them. Only the areas of negative space have been colored with colored pencil. I used a technique where I pressed harder along the inner edge of each area of negative space, and then I decreased my pressure as I moved in towards the center. Smaller spaces, they don't really show a range of value. They're more just a solid pink color. So you can treat large areas and small areas differently. I'm going to show you a couple other techniques you can use other than colored pencil, and you can choose which one you think you might want to do. So on this part of the drawing, which I ended up not using, this was sort of the upper part of the bike where the handles were, I have done some blue colored pencil work, so similar to what you saw in my finished version, just a different color. This area was done with regular pencil, and then up here is a technique I'm going to show you using magic marker. So I kind of just used this discarded part of the drawing as a way to experiment with different techniques, ultimately deciding on the colored pencil technique. Okay, so let's talk about the colored pencil and the pencil. Let me zoom in a little bit here so we get a close-up of what we're going to do. Okay, so the colored pencil and pencil are very similar techniques that are going to rely on using your pressure to create a range of value, or lights and darks. I always recommend that you test out some colors and decide which color or colors you like. You might be surprised how something looks on brown paper as compared to white paper. So let's say I'm going to go with this green. I'm going to start by going along the inner edge of my areas of negative space, and I've prepped just a couple little triangles here to have something to color in. And I'm going to start by going around that inner edge with the hardest pressure to create a big, bold edge of the brightest green. And then as I move inward, I'm going to decrease the pressure so that more of that brown paper is sort of showing through. And I'm layering my pencils a lot as I go, changing direction, because that's going to give me the smoothest result. And ultimately, that pressure is going to decrease so much that I'm going to sort of fade back to the brown of the paper, if I have space to do so. You'll notice that on my example that I showed you, I only used the pink colored pencil, but you might decide that you want to try using different colors so that maybe you have a more colorful mosaic type of effect where different areas of negative space are different colors. Okay, pencil is going to be the same technique where we're going to be using heavier pressure along the edge of the shape and lighter pressure as we move in. The good thing about the pencil option, if you decide to do this, is that you can blend pencil with your finger to help smooth it out, whereas the waxy colored pencils don't really blend so much with a finger. You have to really use good skills to vary that pressure to get that effect. All right, let me add a little bit more of a light value here. And then to finish this off, I can go in with my finger and smooth that out. All right, so that is the pencil. Last but not least, I'm going to show you this paint technique with the markers. Now, you're going to need a water-based marker. These are both blue Crayola markers, slightly different varieties. And I'm gonna make a line of each to show you how this technique works. When you paint with water, this water's a little bit blue because I've been using it already, but just plain old water, pull the brush, the wet brush across the line of color, and you can see how it dissolves the paint, the marker, into kind of watercolor paint. This thinner marker, which was this one, okay? Interestingly, it does not dissolve quite the same as this one. So my point in demonstrating both of these markers is that you should test whatever marker that you find in your house on an area of the brown paper that won't show, or maybe the part of the drawing that you're discarding, just to make sure that this technique is going to work to your satisfaction. Okay, so once I know that I'm good with this one, I'm going to again go in with a line on the inner edge of my shape, and then just using the water, I'm going to wet that line, trying to keep it inside the shape, and then I'm going to pull that color towards the center. Now, if you find that your brush is really saturated with blue, go ahead and rinse it off, and then come back with just fresh water, and that will help make the fading effect better, and it won't just be a solid blue shape. So there are 3 options for coloring your areas of negative space. There's a little bit of a shine right now. Let me take this off the paper so we can look at this closely. We've got the colored pencil, and marker dissolved with a wet paintbrush. I look forward to seeing what you decide to do on your drawing.